Yeah, I'll see you all in hell, Louis, remember that. I'll see you in hell. So, Your Honor, take your rubber stamp and do what you planned to do from the beginning. Justice was not served.
These law enforcement officers are just flat out obsessed with trying to put another Hells Angels in jail.
From a Hells Angels member cursing out the judge to another who remains completely emotionless, these gang members' reactions to death sentence will leave you shocked. So, here are some of the most dangerous Hells Angels members reacting to sentences in court. First, let's talk about Antonio Bagnato. Antonio Bagnato, an Australian national, was sentenced to death in Thailand for the abduction and murder of Wayne Schneider, a former Hells Angels member, in December 2015. Schneider's body was discovered in a shallow sandy grave in Sattahip province with a broken neck and severe facial injuries, consistent with a violent beating. Bagnato and Schneider had been former business partners, co-owning a boxing gym in Sydney. Both were under Australian police scrutiny for other criminal activities. Bagnato was already wanted for the 2014 murder of Bradley Dillon in Sydney. Thai police identified Bagnato as the mastermind behind Schneider's murder, citing a conflict over a multi-million-dollar international drug network spanning Europe and Asia as the motive. Bagnato was arrested in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, after fleeing Thailand following Schneider's murder. The court presented multiple pieces of evidence during the trial, including eyewitness accounts placing Bagnato at the crime scene, GPS data from his rental car, and DNA evidence found at the site where Schneider's body was buried. This evidence was used to convict him despite his not guilty plea. During the sentencing at Pattaya Criminal Court, Bagnato appeared in prison clothes and leg irons. The courtroom was packed as the judge read the death sentence verdict.
The brutal murders of those two boys angered so many people in this county that I could not find at least one person who felt that the death penalty was too harsh.
Bagnato showed no signs of remorse, but instead reacted with disbelief and frustration upon hearing the sentence. He maintained his not guilty plea throughout the trial, and his defense argued that the evidence presented was circumstantial. The Australian government, which has historically opposed the death penalty, faced pressure to intervene. While it had previously advocated against capital punishment in the cases of Andrew Chan and Mayuran Sukumaran, both executed in Indonesia in 2015, Bagnato's case attracted less public sympathy due to the violent nature of the crime and his criminal history. However, human rights advocates stressed that the severity of the crime should not justify the death penalty, emphasizing Australia's stance against capital punishment for all individuals, regardless of the crime. Bagnato's legal team began working on an appeal following the verdict, focusing on challenging the evidence and procedural issues during the trial. They argued that a life sentence would be more appropriate and that the death penalty was disproportionate despite the brutality of the crime. The case continues to draw attention to Thailand's capital punishment policies, with over 600 prisoners on death row despite the last execution occurring in 2009. Advocates argue that justice should be served without the use of the death penalty, while Bagnato's fate remains uncertain as the appeal process unfolds. Next, we have someone who once helped Bagnato escape from Cambodia. Luke Joshua Cook. Luke Joshua Cook, a 34-year-old Australian and member of the Hells Angels Bikie gang, has been sentenced to death in Thailand for attempting to smuggle 500 kilograms of crystal methamphetamine, also known as ice. The drugs, worth approximately $300 million, were intended to be transported from Thailand to Australia. Cook's Thai wife, Kanyarat Wachapitak, was also sentenced to death for her involvement. The smuggling operation dates back to 2015, when Cook and others allegedly acquired the meth from a Chinese supplier in international waters. According to Thai authorities, the drugs were transported on a yacht. However, during their return trip, they encountered a Thai Navy patrol boat near Chonburi province. In an attempt to evade capture, they reportedly dumped the drugs into the sea. Later, over 50 kilograms of the meth washed ashore at a beach in Rayong, leading to further investigation. Cook and his wife were arrested in December 2017 at Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport. During the trial, Cook denied any involvement in the smuggling plot. His defense lawyer argued that there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. Despite their efforts, the court found both Cook and his wife guilty. Upon hearing the death sentence, Cook reportedly showed shock and disbelief. He has maintained his not guilty stance throughout the proceedings, and his lawyer has stated an intention to appeal the verdict within 30 days. In addition to their sentencing, Thai authorities confiscated assets belonging to the couple valued at more than $1.2 million. These included properties and valuables tied to their alleged criminal activities. Cook's arrest has also drawn attention due to his past connection connections to criminal activity. He had previously been convicted of assisting Antonio Bagnato in fleeing to Cambodia after the murder of Hells Angels boss Wayne Schneider. The charges were upheld by the appeals court in 2020, despite their insistence on innocence.
My son is not guilty of the charges he's been charged with. Questions need to be answered. And that's why I'm here in Australia. That's why I'm speaking out.
However, in a stunning reversal, the Thai Supreme Court dismissed all charges against them in September 2021, citing insufficient evidence. This decision marked the end of a 4-year ordeal for the couple, who were released from prison and allowed to resume their lives, with Cook deported back to Australia. While Cook's case took a dramatic turn, another Australian, Tihomer Stojic, found himself facing serious charges in Thailand. Tihomer Stojic. Tihomer Stojic, a 47-year-old Australian, was arrested in Buriram, Thailand, during a coordinated police operation targeting a major drug trafficking ring. The raid led to the discovery of 20 grams of methamphetamine, or ice, hidden in his car. Stojic was taken into custody alongside 2 other Australians, Jamie Hansom and Stephen Hovey, who were allegedly involved in the same network. The investigation revealed that the group had been targeting tourists in Pattaya, a city known for its vibrant nightlife and infamous reputation for being a hotspot for criminal activities. Police found significant evidence during the raids, including 1.1 kilograms of methamphetamine, a firearm, and bank slips showing financial transactions exceeding 1 million baht. The evidence painted a clear picture of a well-organized operation, with Stojic and his associates playing key roles in the distribution of meth to foreigners in the region. As Stojic faced the possibility of a death sentence if convicted, his reaction was one of shock and fear. His arrest marked the beginning of a tense period in custody, with authorities continuing to investigate the full extent of his involvement in the drug trafficking operation. Stojic, like the others arrested, was aware of the harsh penalties Thailand imposes for drug-related crimes, particularly those involving large quantities of narcotics. The severity of the charges weighed heavily on him, and it was reported that he appeared increasingly anxious as the legal process unfolded. Stojic has not publicly commented on the charges or his involvement in the operation. However, police believe the men were working with a larger network that spanned several countries, including links to other criminal groups such as the Comanchero Motorcycle Club. The Thai authorities have stated that the men's goal was to sell methamphetamine to tourists, particularly in Pattaya, which remains a key area of focus in the fight against drug trafficking. As the investigation continues, Stojic's future remains uncertain, with the looming threat of a death sentence hanging over him. Next up, we have Jeffrey Velthoen and a murder that shocked many. Jeffrey Velthoen. Jeffrey Velthoen was arrested in connection with the February 2015 murder of Stephen Lucy. Lucy was found shot in a pickup truck after driving erratically and crashing near the intersection of Santa Fe Avenue and Berkeley Road, north of Turlock. He later died at the hospital from his gunshot wounds. Velthoen, a known associate of the Modesto Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, was initially considered a suspect in the case, but there was not enough evidence to charge him. However, during a federal investigation into an alleged drug ring involving high-ranking members of the Hells Angels, new information surfaced linking Velthoen to the murder. In October 2020, this led to his arrest. The prosecution presented evidence that Velthoen was involved in the murder. A bystander had found Losey with a gunshot wound to the leg, which had hit an artery, and asked him who shot him. Losey's dying words were that Jeff had shot him, and the name Velthoen was mentioned. Investigators also found that Velthoen had been shot in the hand shortly after the incident, which raised further questions about his involvement. Velthoen claimed that he and another man had met Losey over the sale of a watch, and that during the meeting, the other man opened fire with 2 guns, hitting both him and Losey. Velthoen told investigators the name of the other man, but couldn't provide any further details, and investigators were unable to track down anyone matching his description. Despite the new evidence, the case was dropped when the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office withheld crucial evidence and witnesses from the prosecution, including information about a possible second shooter. Without this information, the District Attorney's Office moved to dismiss the case, although they hinted at refiling it when the information was provided. Velthoen was initially charged with second-degree murder with an enhancement for using a gun. The prosecutor also mentioned the possibility of adding a special circumstance, which would elevate the charges to first-degree murder, making Velthoen eligible for the death penalty or life in prison without parole. However, with the federal investigation ongoing, Velthoen's future remains uncertain, and the case could be refiled once the withheld evidence is available. After Velthoen's case took a turn, let's now look at the chilling story of Caius Veiovis and the brutal murders he was involved in. Caius Veiovis. Caius Veiovis was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the brutal murders of 3 men in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. He was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and intimidating witnesses. The jury found him guilty after 6 days of deliberation. As the verdict was read, Veiovis showed no remorse. Instead, he shouted to the jurors,
Yeah, I'll see you all in hell, Louis. Remember that. I'll see you in hell.
The murders took place in 2011 when David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell went missing. Their dismembered bodies were found buried outside Pittsfield 10 days later. Prosecutors said Veiovis helped Adam Lee Hall, a member of the Hells Angels, and David Shalhoub in the kidnapping and murders. Glasser was set to testify against Hall in an assault case, and the other 2 victims were killed to cover up the crime. Throughout the trial, Veiovis insisted he was innocent. He claimed he had been in isolation for 3 years and refused to cooperate with authorities. He said the prosecutor even admitted that he did not kill the victims, but was looking for information about the disposal of their bodies. Veiovis rejected a plea deal that would have given him a reduced sentence of 7 years, stating he would rather spend his life in prison than confess to something he did not do. The court handed Veiovis 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole.
So, Your Honor, take your rubber stamp and do what you planned to do from the beginning. Justice was not served. I'm an innocent man. You condemn an innocent man, and I will appeal this.
His co-defendants, Hall and Shalhoub, were also convicted of the murders and received similar sentences. The case shocked the town of Pittsfield, and due to its high profile, the trial was moved to Springfield, Massachusetts, to ensure a fair jury. Veiovis has a history of violent crimes. In 1999, he and his girlfriend were convicted of assault after they lured a teenage girl into their motel room, cut her back with a razor blade, and drank her blood. He served 3 years in prison for that crime. In 2006, he was charged with kidnapping and drug possession after holding 2 strippers against their will, but the kidnapping charges were later dropped. Despite his conviction, Veiovis remains defiant. After his sentencing, he told the court he planned to appeal. His appearance, which includes horn-like implants on his forehead, 666 tattooed above his eyebrows, and other satanic symbols, drew significant attention during the trial. However, prosecutors focused on the solid evidence linking him to the murders rather than his looks or beliefs.
Really, I'm glad it's all over. Justice was served, even though we'll never get him back.
How important was it for you to be here today for this 3rd sentence?
Very important, you know, to help to bring some type of closure. I don't know how much we're gonna get, but it's a start for something.
Caius Veiovis will now spend the rest of his life behind bars, but he continues to claim he had no part in the crimes. Veiovis wasn't the only one tied to these brutal murders. Adam Lee Hall also played a key role in the shocking events. Adam Lee Hall.
Indictment 2011-139 County Record, charging the defendant with murder.
Adam Lee Hall, a ranking member of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, was convicted of killing 3 men and received 3 consecutive life sentences for his crimes. Hall was found guilty of murdering David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell in August 2011. Prosecutors said he killed them to prevent Glasser from testifying against him in a separate case. Frampton and Chadwell were murdered simply because they were with Glasser at the time. During sentencing, the judge described Hall's actions as showing depravity and disregard for human dignity beyond his experience. He was also sentenced to additional time for armed robbery and kidnapping. Hall targeted Glasser, who had a mental disability, making him particularly vulnerable. The court heard how Hall stalked, intimidated, beat, framed, and eventually killed Glasser. Hall showed little emotion during the sentencing. He hung his head as the verdict was read and remained mostly quiet throughout the process. However, Hall had an outburst during the prosecutor's statements where he blatantly denied key events that linked him to the murder.
Over there at the house on Sunday afternoon to meet with you.
20 miles away at a barbecue.
All you will say no more during the remainder of the closing argument. You may proceed, Mr. Case.
Despite the heavy sentence, Hall's defense attorney argued that there was no physical evidence directly linking him to the murders. However, 2 of his co-defendants testified that Hall was the mastermind behind the killings. Another person charged as an accessory claimed he helped dispose of the bodies out of fear of Hall. Hall's crimes deeply affected the victims' families and the community. Family members of the victims expressed their relief that justice had been served, though they acknowledged that no sentence could bring back their loved ones.
Definitely there's something that's never going to be filled. I mean, because there are questions that I have that only he can answer, you know what I mean? And he's not going to do that, just like he never apologized because he's not sorry for what he did.
The judge emphasized that Hall's actions struck at the heart of the justice system, as he repeatedly sought to obstruct it by eliminating witnesses.
You, upon your oath, do say that the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree. Yes. So say you all, ladies and gentlemen, of the jury. Yes.
Adam Lee Hall's sentencing marked the end of a long legal battle that started with his attempts to silence a witness and escalated into a brutal triple homicide. Next, we have the third man involved in the murder of David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell. David Challieu. David Challieu was one of the 3 men involved in the horrific 2011 Berkshire County triple murder. Along with Adam Lee Hall and Caius Vayovis, Challieu kidnapped David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell from Frampton's Pittsfield home in the early hours of August 28, 2011. The victims were tortured, shot, and dismembered before their bodies were found in Beckett, Massachusetts 10 days later. This brutal act was linked to Challieu's involvement in criminal activities, including his relationship with Hall, who was set to testify against him at the time. In the courtroom, after being convicted of first-degree murder, Challieu was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole.
Premeditation with malice aforethought. Mr. Foreman, was this the verdict of the jury?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, was this your verdict?
Yes.
And was this verdict unanimous?
Yes.
You, the jury, further find that your guilty verdict of murder in the first degree is also based upon a theory of extreme atrocity or cruelty. Was this the verdict of the jury, Mr. Foreman?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, was this your verdict?
Yes.
This decision was made to reflect the severity of the crimes and to honor each of the victims' lives individually. Challieu's defense lawyer, Donald W. Frank, requested that the sentences be served concurrently, but the judge rejected this and ordered consecutive terms. During the sentencing, Challieu did not show much emotion. His lawyer mentioned that while Challieu disagreed with the verdict, he accepted the judicial process. He expressed his condolences to the victims' families and apologized to his own family who were present in court. However, the families of the victims were not moved by his apologies. They showed no mercy, instead calling for the harshest sentence possible. Impact statements read by family members revealed the immense pain they had suffered due to the senseless killings. Berkshire District Attorney David Capeless emphasized that Challieu deserved no mercy due to the brutal nature of the crimes. He noted that the victims had been tortured, mutilated, and killed in an incredibly depraved way. Capeless and the court made it clear that the murders were not only heartless, but also a betrayal of trust, as the victims had been targeted in their vulnerable states.
Cruelly cut, stabbed, beaten, and then gutted.
As the court proceedings came to an end, Challieu left the courtroom with some of his family members expressing their love for him. However, for the families of the victims, there was no compassion for the man who had taken away their loved ones in such a brutal and callous manner. Next, let's look at Jay Witt's case, where the charges take a different turn, but still connect to the world of crime and violence. Jay Witt. Jay Witt, a 48-year-old Hells Angels member, was sentenced to 30 to 40 years in prison for manslaughter, use of a weapon, and possession of a weapon by a prohibited person. He had pleaded guilty to these charges after the prosecutors dropped a murder charge against him. The case stemmed from the death of fellow Hells Angels member William Furlong, who was found dead at the Hells Angels clubhouse on July 14, 2013.
That's probably one of the reasons that we took the plea to manslaughter, because there were some issues that that were needed to be resolved. And we thought we would assure ourselves of a conviction with the manslaughter rather than a trial where there's issues with regard to justification.
Witt must serve 17.5 years before he is eligible for parole. Witt had been arrested in connection with Furlong's death. Authorities confirmed that he was taken into custody near 30th Street and Sorensen Parkway at around 9:30 a.m. on August 19, 2013. Officers from the U.S. Marshal Service and Omaha Police were involved in the arrest. Witt was initially wanted on counts of second-degree murder and use of a firearm to commit a felony. During the investigation, police tracked Witt's stolen vehicle to a location near Interstate 680 and Mormon Bridge Road using OnStar. A gun was discovered in the vehicle during the arrest. Furlong's body was found at the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, and the cause of death was determined to be a single gunshot wound. The initial investigation pointed to foul play, leading authorities to treat the case as a homicide. Last but not least, we have Stephen Sanders. Stephen Sanders. Stephen Sanders, a former leader of the San Diego chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for multiple serious crimes. These included kidnapping, assault, robbery, and solicitation of murder. Sanders had been involved in several violent criminal activities, which eventually led to his conviction.
I'm in here for multiple cases. I'm in here for armed robbery with a gang enhancement. I'm in here for assaults. I'm in here for now there's so many cases.
Sanders admitted to kidnapping 2 people for the benefit of the Hells Angels, a crime that involved the use of force and intimidation. He also admitted to assaulting people with the intent to cause great bodily harm, a violent attack that occurred during a party in Pacific Beach. Along with these charges, he faced accusations of soliciting murder, attempting to have witnesses and investigators killed in relation to a pending case involving kidnapping and torture. At his sentencing, Sanders spoke to the court, stating that he felt pressured to enter a guilty plea.
Targeted by the law enforcement agents. These law enforcement officers are just flat out obsessed with trying to put me and other Hells Angels in jail.
He was aware of the long sentence he faced if convicted at trial. Despite this, Sanders continued to deny that the Hells Angels were a criminal street gang, a point that his attorney raised in an attempt to withdraw the guilty plea. However, the judge denied this motion, and Sanders was sentenced to 25 years in state prison.
They try to label us a gang. We deny that. We're incorporated as a corporation. We pay federal and state taxes in the United States, and we adamantly deny that we're a gang.
The case was a significant victory for law enforcement, with the Drug Enforcement Administration and the San Diego District Attorney's Office working together to bring Sanders to justice. The prosecutor, District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis, praised the sentencing, stating that it removed a dangerous criminal from the streets of San Diego. Sanders had been involved in a series of violent crimes over the years, and his plan to have key witnesses and law enforcement officers killed showed the extent of his criminal behavior. Sanders' conviction and sentencing were a major blow to the Hells Angels chapter in San Diego, as it removed a key leader from their organization. If you enjoyed this video, click on the card showing on your screen right now for more videos.